Yeah, so the new Cypher was pretty challenging to design because we had to combine the quad and the chop top into a single product. So we try to take that kind of advanced riding from the quad and then the ease of use of the chop top into one board. One of the keys to that is in the bottom shape. We ended up using what we affectionately we can call it the flying V. The idea with that is that it's a relatively deep V and a spiral concave. So that really gives the board stability. It also allows the board to move from rail to rail pretty easily. And that's nice if the board's wide. It's really good if it's choppy. It's cool in onshore. And it's cool if you're not such a good rider and you're riding strapless, then at least you have the stability from the bottom shape. It's standard as a quad fin setup. The quad fin gives it a lot of drive and power. You can run it as a tri. Generally, in most conditions, I'd say the quad would be the way to go. Experiment with it, but combined with the wide tail, it gives it a lot of drive, keeps you upwind, allows the board, the tail to break out and to turn very well. It's a pretty square block tail, as much area as we can get into the tail. This gives you a lot of drive through the mush, it keeps the board going. And then it's narrower in the nose than what we had in the chop top, so you can kind of end up with the board that pulls around a little bit more as you come off the top, and single concave in the front of the nose. Rail wise, you still have a fair amount of volume running through the tail, and then a medium amount of pinch on the rail. So it's a pretty fast board, pretty easy to use. Okay, so the concept of the compact was really to build a board that worked for us in places like Cape Town where it's really windy and not necessarily for the biggest waves. So what you have is a pretty short outline with a 5.6 or a 5.8 outline, still pretty wide. Goes into quite a narrow parallel tail, that gives it stability and speed. Still have curve in the back, so the board snaps off the top pretty well. It's a V bottom, which is good for chop, it's good for windy conditions, it's good for going really fast. Now, as you move towards having so much curve in the nose, what this does is it pulls the nose of the board around a lot easier when you're coming off the top, when you're riding in certain conditions, specifically strapped, you're able to really drive the board through the turn. So having a bit more curve right up in the front on a short board is actually pretty useful. In terms of rails, you've got a pretty classic surf rail. It's not too skinny and it's not too full. If you make the rail too skinny, then you're inclined to bury the board when you're trying to do a very powerful bottom turn. And if it's too boxy, then of course it drops and pops out if you drive it too hard. Going back to the tail, again, it's pretty classic balanced drive. A lot of the board is trying to get a balance out of it, that you can push it really hard, that you can drive the board through the turn, you can drive it off the top. It's very compact, it's underneath your body, and it's really easy to throw around. So yeah, the Converse is, I guess, what I term as a classic shape, in that it's kind of your go-to board that you would want to have in your quiver, no matter what the conditions are, no matter where you are. It's really designed for intermediate wind strength. It's a bit more technical to use in the whole range, in that it's got more rocker, and it's got a fair amount of hip, it's got a single concave. All of those things kind of loosen the board up and make it a bit more challenging to use. As a tri-fin set, you're quite far back. It gives you a lot of snap. You come off the top really easily. It means that your input you need to have a good balance when you're driving the board through the turn. The rail's an intermediate rail, so it's not too full and it's not too fine. I think balance on a board like this is essential, like getting the right balance of the area, of the shape, the wide point, and the hip. All that together just gives you something that really, as you get into the board, it's a board that doesn't really have a limit. It's like the more you find the board, the more you can push it, the more comfortable it becomes. So comparing the compact to the Converse, I mean, the main differences are, if you start with the outline, that the compact is more parallel in the hip area. It also has a more round tail. So the parallel rail gives the board a lot of stability, especially when you're going fast. And then, whereas the round tail allows you to still snap when you're coming off the top. If you go to the bottom shape, the compact's got a V bottom, and then if you look at the converse, that's got a single concave bottom. So the single concave really loosens the board up. The disadvantage of a single concave is that it's not going to give you as much stability in chop and if you're going extremely fast. Now when it comes to the nose, there's a lot of discussions about how that the compact's got a wider nose. Technically it doesn't. It's just if you take the traditional converse shape and you bring it in, then you lose around 6 inches of nose. What this last bit gives you is if you're driving really hard off the top, especially in small waves, and you bury the whole rail, then the additional bit of curve will help to pull the board around in the turn. So if you're comparing the compact and the Cypher, one of the first things you'd notice is that the wide point on the compact is a bit further forward and it's much more parallel in the hip. What this does is gives it stability, which you need in windier conditions and in more powerful surf and when you're going faster. Whereas with the Cypher, you've got more hip and you're moving the wide point back and then you've got a wider tail. So all of this, as you further over the board, you're able to really get the board to maneuver and soften up, whereas if you were going down the face of a 4-foot wave, you wouldn't really want to have all that maneuverability. Going to the bottom shape, the compact has like a V bottom, whereas the Cypher has a heavier spiral V. So that again gives it even more stability to help with the width. Also helps the board to roll from rail to rail, which is something that both of them have to a degree. They just use them in varying amounts. Looking at the front curves are pretty similar on the boards because you kind of want to have them pull around as you're coming off the top. You want to have the boards that you're using the outline as you bury in the whole rail, and that's really a positive from having the shorter outline.